Almost didn't answer the phone that night. Old 11, Rachel had already gone to bed, and I was still at the kitchen table going over permit revisions for a project in Canada that had been stalled for 3 weeks. My phone buzzed. Leah's name. I stared at it for a second before I picked up. Her voice was low, almost careful. "Are you alone right now?" Toward the hallway. The bedroom light was off. Nicole said, "What's wrong?" Paused, long enough that I set my pencil down. "Long," she said. I need to tell you something. Not over the phone. Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere quiet." Audible. I didn't sleep well that night. Oltful had been friends since university. Queens, Kingston, the kind of friendship that survives graduation and moves and bad relationships because it was built on something real, or at least that's what I always believed. When Rachel and I got together, Leah was already part of the package. She came to our housewarming in Barhaven. She helped us paint the spare room. All wedding in September 3 years ago, standing in the second row, crying before Rachel even reached the altar. Well, I liked Leah. She was straightforward in a way most people aren't. She said what she meant. She didn't do small talk well, and she'd told me once, early on, that she thought Rachel had married up. I'd laughed. Rachel had rolled her eyes. Leah had just shrugged and said, "I'm serious." What was the thing about Leah? She was always serious. When she called me past 11 on a Tuesday and asked to meet somewhere quiet, I didn't think she was being dramatic. I thought she was afraid. Horton. We met the next day at a Tim Hortons on Merivale, not the busy one near the Costco, the quieter one a few blocks south. She was already there when I arrived, both hands around a coffee she hadn't touched. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Bolt down. She didn't say hello. Lord, I've been trying to figure out how to do this for 2 weeks, she said. I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, that maybe I was reading it wrong, that you two would work it out on your own. Old May, Old, I need you to not interrupt me. She looked up, because if you interrupt me, I'm going to lose my nerve. I'm going to walk out of here, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life knowing I said nothing. Ortmem, I nodded. She reached into her jacket pocket and set her phone on the table, face down. Old month, she said. Rachel told me she was going to Toronto for a conference. Health policy thing through her department at the university. Rachel taught public health at Carleton. She went to conferences a few times a year. I'd stopped asking about them because she always came back tired and irritable and said the panels were exhausting. Well, I said, the one in October. Wasn't at a conference. Leah's jaw tightened. I know because I called her hotel to leave a message. Her phone was going to voicemail, and I had something I needed to tell her, and the hotel said there was no reservation under her name. I thought I had the wrong hotel, so I texted her and asked where she was staying. She paused. She texted back a hotel name. I called that hotel too. Same thing. Coffee machine behind the counter made a long grinding sound. All about it when she got back, Leah said. She told me I must have had the wrong number, that the front desk people make mistakes. She picked up her coffee, then put it back down without drinking. And I almost let it go. I almost did. But then a few days later, I ran into Marcus. Marcus, I knew the name. He worked in Rachel's department. They'd been on a curriculum committee together for the past year. I'd met him once at a faculty thing Rachel brought me to. Tall, easy smile, the kind of guy who laughs at his own jokes and somehow makes it charming. Won't mention the conference, Leah said. He asked me if Rachel had a good time. I said I assumed so. He said she and I grabbed dinner. One night, the hotel bar was packed, so we found that place on King Street. Leah looked at me steadily. He didn't know she'd told you it was a work trip. He thought I knew everything. Felt something happen in my chest. Not pain, exactly. More like pressure. Like when you press on a bruise you forgot was there. I stopped. Were they? What they were, Leah said. But I know she lied to you about where she was. And I know she was with him. And I know. She stopped. Looked at her hands. I know this isn't the first time she's been vague about where she is. Phone over. There was a screenshot on the screen, a text exchange between her and Rachel from about 6 months ago. I read it slowly. Are you? You never answered, Rachel. Sorry, was at Marcus's helping with that proposal. Lost track of time, Leah. You okay? Rachel? Yeah, why? Leah. Just asking. All was a gap of a few minutes, then. Orpshel. Please don't mention this to Daniel. He gets weird about me staying late with colleagues. I read that last line twice. Audible, I get weird. I'd never said a single thing to Rachel about Marcus. Not once. I hadn't even thought about it, because I trusted her, because it didn't occur to me that there was anything to think about. Powerful, I get weird. Well, that sentence did something to me that I'm still not sure I have words for. It wasn't just that she'd lied. It was that she'd preemptively framed me as the problem. She'd built a version of me, controlling, suspicious, unreasonable, and handed it to Leah as the reason for the secrecy, without me ever being in the room. Walt handle, I sat there for a long time. Walt didn't say anything. She was good at that, actually. She let the silence be what it needed to be. Finally, I said, "How long have you been sitting on this?" I ran into Marcus. "About 3 weeks. Ortnulf, why'd you wait?" Quiet for a moment. "Because I love Rachel, and because I love you, and because I kept hoping I was wrong." She looked up, and then I realized that hoping I was wrong was just another way of protecting myself from having to do this. Home on autopilot. I don't remember most of it. I remember pulling into the driveway, sitting in the car with the engine off, watching the light in the front window. Nicole was home. She'd be in the living room with her laptop and a glass of wine, the way she was every Wednesday evening. The ordinary rhythm of our life. Hallway, I sat there for 20 minutes. Unread, then I went inside. I didn't say anything to Rachel that night, or the night after. Old. I know some people reading this will think that was weakness. A few people in my life, not many, but a few, have told me they would have confronted her immediately. Demanded answers right there in the hallway. Maybe they're right. Maybe that's the version of this story where things go differently. But I've never been that person. I process slowly. I go quiet before I go loud. And I'd also learned, somewhere in the past 3 years of marriage, that Rachel was very, very good at turning a confrontation around. At making me feel like the thing I was upset about was actually a symptom of something wrong with me. I waited, and while I waited, I paid attention. It wasn't hard to find things once I started looking. Not because Rachel was sloppy, she wasn't, but because I'd stopped looking for so long that even the smallest inconsistencies jumped out. She worked late 3 times in 2 weeks, which wasn't unusual except that I texted her once around 7, and she didn't respond for 40 minutes and then said she'd been in a meeting at 7 p.m. on a Friday. She bought a new perfume I'd never seen, left it on the bathroom counter without mentioning it. Coughed at her phone twice in one evening, the kind of laugh you try to smother because you don't want to explain it. And when I glanced over, she tilted the screen slightly away from me. All of it. I didn't say a word. About 10 days after my coffee with Leah, I went to see a lawyer. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I wanted to know what my options were before I did anything. The lawyer's name was Cheryl, and she was calm and direct, and didn't seem even slightly surprised by what I told her. She explained the process, equalization of net family property, the house, what we'd each be entitled to. She told me not to move out of the shared home, no matter what. She said that twice. Told me to document everything, quietly. Home and started a notes file on my phone. Dates, times, things I'd observed. Not because I was trying to build a case exactly, more because I needed to feel like I was doing something. Like I wasn't just standing still, while the life I thought I had dissolved quietly around me. That night things became undeniable, wasn't dramatic. There was no dramatic confrontation, no door thrown open, no raised voices in a kitchen. Older evening. Rachel said she had a faculty event and would be home by 10. I said okay. She kissed me on the cheek, she still did that, still kept up all the small habits of an ordinary marriage, and left. 30, Marcus posted a photo on Instagram. A dinner table, 2 glasses of wine, a candle, geotag, a restaurant in Westboro. Caption, good company. Nicole had tagged herself in one of his photos maybe 8 months ago. I didn't follow Marcus, but we had mutual connections. Leah, for one. She'd screenshotted it and texted it to me 30 seconds after it appeared. Phone buzzed. Leah's name. The screenshot she'd sent. She typed, "I'm sorry, Daniel." Looked at that image for a long time. Rachel was not in the photo, but she didn't have to be. She was somewhere in that restaurant. With him. On a night she'd told me was a faculty event. Called Cheryl's office first thing Friday morning. Where I'm supposed to tell you I was furious. That I paced the house. That I threw something. That I sat Rachel down and made her account for everything. Wasn't. And like that. What I felt, mostly, was tired. A very specific kind of tired that I think only makes sense if you've experienced it yourself. The exhaustion of realizing that a significant portion of your adult life was built on something that wasn't fully real, not the rage of betrayal, the quiet, flattening weight of understanding. All felt, underneath that, something I wasn't expecting, relief. It was over. Because I finally understood why I'd been feeling like a stranger in my own house for the past year. Why conversations with Rachel had started to feel like negotiations. Why I'd begun, slowly and without noticing, to make myself smaller. To ask less, expect less, explain myself more. Bolton imagined it. That was the thing. I'd spent a year quietly wondering if I was the problem. Turns out I was just paying attention to something real. Old Rachel on a Sunday afternoon. We were in the kitchen. She was making tea. I sat down at the table and I said her name, and something in my voice must have been different because she turned around and looked at me and didn't say anything. Told her I knew. I didn't list everything. I didn't show her the screenshots or the notes on my phone. I just said I knew, and I said I'd already spoken to a lawyer, and I said I thought we both deserved to stop pretending. Well, she cried. She told me it wasn't what it looked like. She told me she'd been unhappy and confused, and that didn't excuse it, but she needed me to understand. She told me she loved me, and she wanted to work on it. All of it. I didn't argue with any of it. I told her I'd be staying in the house for now, and I asked her to give me some space for the evening. Room. I heard the door close. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, in the dark, in the quiet, and I thought about what it meant to stop being someone I'd been trying to be for 3 years. It wasn't cinematic, but it was mine. Those few months were the kind of difficult that doesn't make for a good story. There were lawyers and paperwork, and a mediator named Gary, who had a habit of summarizing both parties' positions in a way that made everyone sound slightly unreasonable. There were conversations with Rachel that started measured and ended badly. There were nights I ordered from the same St. Hubert down the road because I couldn't be bothered to cook for one person in a house that still had two of everything. Told a few people, not many. My brother in Sudbury, who said yeah in a way that suggested he'd been waiting for this call. Two friends who reacted differently, one with outrage on my behalf, one with an uncomfortable silence that told me he wasn't sure whose side to be on. I didn't talk to Leah for about 6 weeks. Not out of anger, I didn't blame her, not even for a moment, but because any conversation with her felt like picking up a thread that connected directly back to Rachel, and I wasn't ready for that yet. Isles. She texted once in November, just to ask how I was doing. I said I was okay. She said she was sorry she'd been the one to tell me. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. That was it. All sold in December. We split the equity, which after the mortgage and the real estate commission and the land transfer costs came out to less than either of us expected. I found an apartment in Centertown, second floor, big windows, almost no furniture. I bought a secondhand couch from Facebook Marketplace. I kept the French press and the good cutting board and the lamp from the spare room that had originally been mine. I started running again. I'd stopped in the second year of our marriage for no reason I could name. Just gradually stopped, the way you stop doing things that are only for you. I started going out early in the mornings along the canal. November cold, December cold, January brutal. I ran anyway. There's something about moving through cold air alone in the early morning that makes you feel like yourself again. Like the part of you that exists independent of anyone else's story about you. That's all. I won't pretend those months were anything other than what they were. But I also won't pretend I was miserable the whole time. There was something in the honesty of it, in finally being in a situation that matched how I'd actually been feeling. I ran into Leah in February. Planned. I was at a bookshop on Bank Street on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of gray, cold February day where you go somewhere warm just to be around other people. And she was in the back, near the essays section with a stack of books under one arm, frowning at the back cover of something. Looked up and saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a second, and then she smiled. Careful and a little sad, the way people smile when they're not sure what version of this meeting is going to happen. Oh, hey, I said. Oh, hey, she said. Ended up getting coffee at the place next door. We talked for 2 hours. Not about Rachel, mostly. About her work. She was a policy analyst for the province. Something to do with housing affordability. And about my projects. And about a hiking trip she was planning in the spring somewhere near Lake Superior. She'd been going through her own thing. She told me, nothing as clear-cut as mine, but the slow dissolution of a relationship she'd been in for almost 4 years. She said it had made her think about what she actually wanted versus what she'd agreed to want. I knew that feeling. Plans that day. We said, see you around, and it felt like we both meant it. March, she texted me. asked if I wanted to do the Rito Trail one Saturday. I said yes. For 4 hours. It was the first genuinely warm day of the year, and the whole city felt like it was exhaling. She brought those Dutch waffle cookies, stroop waffles, the ones you're supposed to balance on top of a hot coffee to soften them, and handed me one without explaining, which felt exactly like Leah. On the drive back, she said, "Can I say something without it being weird?" "Probably not," I said, "but go ahead." "Glad you're doing okay." She looked at the window. I felt guilty for a long time, like I'd pulled a pin on something. "Well, anything," I said. "You just told me what was already there." Quiet for a moment. Still. "Well, nothing," I said. "You did the right thing, even though it was hard. That's actually pretty rare." "Oh." She didn't say anything after that, but the silence felt different from the careful silence at the Tim Hortons back in October. It was easier. Like something that had been held at a distance was finally allowed to simply exist. "Oh, I'm not going to tell you everything that happened after that. Some of it is still happening, and some of it is mine in a way I want to keep. Well, what I'll say is this. I spent 3 years of my marriage making myself smaller and calling it compromise. I spent another year telling myself I was imagining things because it was easier than facing what I was actually sensing. And then one night, a woman who had every reason to stay quiet made a phone call anyway because she thought I deserved to know the truth more than she deserved to avoid a difficult conversation. Well, that matters to me, more than I knew how to say at the time. Well, and I finalized the divorce in April. She moved back to Kingston. I don't know much about her life now, and that's not resentment. It's just the way it is. We were married for 3 years, and some of them were genuinely good, and I don't need to rewrite the whole thing to protect myself from the ending. Who I was when I was sitting at that kitchen table in Barhaven, going over permit revisions, when my phone buzzed and showed me Leah's name. I think about how I almost let it go to voicemail, how close I came to not picking up. All moments are strange that way, the ones that don't feel important until they already are. The apartment is still pretty bare, but it's mine. The windows face west. In the evenings, the light comes in for about an hour before it goes, and I've started to look forward to that hour in a way that feels like something, like paying attention to your own life on purpose. Wholesome Saturdays, there are stroop waffles and 4 hours on a trail, and a drive back through a city that finally feels like it fits again. Well, enough. For now, that's more than enough. A moment I keep coming back to. Not the conversation at the Tim Hortons, not the night I told Rachel I knew, not even the day the papers were signed. It's earlier than all of that. It's me sitting in a dark car in my own driveway, engine off, watching a light in a window, knowing something was wrong and choosing, again, not to go in and say so. I did that more times than I want to count, and for a long time I told myself it was patience, or maturity, or not wanting to cause a scene over something I might be misreading. But sitting with it now, honestly, I think it was something closer to fear. Not of Rachel, of being wrong, of being the person who blew up a life over a feeling. What I learned, slowly and not without cost, is that ignoring something true doesn't make it smaller. It just makes you smaller around it. All knew that. She sat with information that could have cost her a friendship that she had every social reason to bury, and she made a phone call anyway, not because it was easy or clean or without risk. Because she understood that doing right by someone sometimes means accepting that it's going to hurt them first. That's a kind of integrity I didn't fully understand until I watched someone else practice it. Or the willingness to do the hard, honest thing, even when the easier option is right there. That's not a small quality. Most people don't have it. Leah did, and it changed the course of my life. Or the clarity I eventually found didn't come from a single revelation. It came from paying attention, from noticing the small things, the tilted phone screen, the unexplained perfume, the meeting on a Friday at 7 p.m., and trusting that what I was observing was real. There's a kind of intelligence in that, in being willing to see what's actually in front of you instead of the version you prefer. I'd spent a year overriding my own perception because the alternative was uncomfortable. Learning to trust what I actually knew, not just what I wanted to be true. That took longer than it should have. Was the part after. The months of running along the canal in January cold, of an apartment with almost no furniture, of relearning what it felt like to make a decision for my own life, without first calculating how someone else would receive it. That part didn't feel like strength while it was happening. It felt like getting up and doing the next thing, and then the next, and then the next after that. But I think that's actually what resilience is. Not some dramatic refusal to fall apart. Just the quiet, unglamorous work of continuing to move forward when you'd honestly rather not. Well, I'm still doing that work. Some days it's easier than others. Well, now is that the truth, even when it's late and unwelcome, is still worth having. That the people who tell it to you anyway, the Leahs of your life, are worth more than almost anything else. And that the version of yourself on the other side of an honest reckoning is usually someone you recognize more clearly than the person you were before. Well, light in the window. I think about it sometimes. I'm glad I finally went inside.